hello everyone. We are doing our first webinar of the year. Usually we do a webinar at the end of the month, and we may do another webinar at the end of this month. But there is a special topic that I'm covering today, which is a little bit of a departure from what we normally do in our webinars. So in this webinar, it's being triggered by the fact that we are going into beta testing of our new Intelligent-MoC software. So instead of having to do 20 or 30 separate demonstrations, I decided that I'd do a single webinar and record it for all the people that are going to be participating in the Intelligent-MoC program. And if you want to participate in the Intelligent-MoC program and you haven't already gotten hold of me and got put on the list, it's not too late. Just go ahead and send me an email, edward.marzell@kenexis.com, and I will put you excuse me, into the beta testing program. And the key initial starting point in the MoC configuration process is setting up your approval process, or the workflow of the MoC. And the workflow of the MoC is the critical thing that is going to prevent your things from falling through the cracks, prevent changes from your highly hazardous process from resulting in accidents. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As y'all know, I kind of jump around a little bit as I'm giving presentations and such. But I'm going to start, instead of just diving right into the software and getting into the details of how to set up the workflow, I'm going to talk a little bit about MoC. So MoC, management of change, in virtually all areas of the world is going to be required. In the United States, it's required under our OSHA process safety management rule. In other parts of the world, there are similar regulations that require that if you are making a change to your process that is not a replacement in kind, that means taking part A and replacing it with a new part A. If it's not a replacement in kind, you need to follow a management of change process in order to make sure that everyone has thought through all the tasks that need to get done, risk analyses get done, approvals get done, everything gets checked off before you actually implement the change. And even after the change is done, making sure that all the follow-up activities occur. So ultimately, what you're going to see in management of change is a database, and it's going to be a CRUD database. I will explain what a CRUD database is later. That would be create, read, update, and delete, because that's all that the software is actually doing. The software itself, not really that sophisticated. I have no idea how other vendors are able to charge the insane amounts of money that they're charging for something so realistically simplistic. But I digress. Let me get going. So before we actually dive into that, let's look at the disaster that really kind of kicked it off for management of change and said, we as a industry have to do better. We can't let this happen again. We need to formalize and think through what we were doing, and that's going to be the Flixboro disaster. So I'm at an article in the Chemical Engineer website talking about the Flixboro disaster, and basically what happened and why, if we had a good management of change process and we adhered to the good management of change process, things like this shouldn't be able to happen. So basically the scene was set for the disaster when one of the reactors, so there were 5 reactors, we will see in just a second, and one of the reactors started leaking and they wanted to take it out of service, and they needed to connect the piping between reactor 3 and reactor 5 when they were taking reactor 4 out of service. And shall we say, it was a failure. Okay, and not only a failure, 28 fatalities, 36 injuries. Right there we have a picture of what happened. This happened in 1974. I was either 4 or 5 years old at the time, so long time ago. And this is really kind of the starting point for good MOC practices. So, okay, we're going to try to connect from reactor number 4 to reactor number 6, because reactor number 5 right here had developed a crack. It was leaking and they wanted to take it out of service with the minimum amount of delay. So you'll see that there was an upstream reactor, a downstream reactor, and this piece of piping in the middle is what they put together. And they put it together very quickly, and they put it together without the assistance of a bona fide expert in mechanical engineering in piping strain and stresses, because what you see here on the left and what you see here on the right are something called piping bellows. They are expansion joints that are going to allow the pipe to stretch when it gets hot and contract when it gets cool without rupturing. Well, in this case, it did rupture. We'll explain how that happened in just a second. One of the other key items that comes into management of change, and it's getting more attention now than it used to, especially as people my age are taking early retirement packages and leaving the industry to reduce headcount. Up to the time when he left the company, works engineer Mr. Rigall, who was the chartered mechanical engineer, and after that, they took active steps to replace their chartered mechanical engineer and could not find a suitable mechanical engineer on site. And basically, the person that was doing a little bit of mechanical engineering was determined, shall we say, to be, insufficient or not qualified for the task. So what happened? Let me go ahead. I'm going to show you. This is a depiction of what actually happened at Flixboro. So you've got an upstream reactor. You've got a downstream reactor. You've got bellows on the left-hand side. You've got bellows on the right-hand side. Strike number 1. You've got an elevation change. Strike number 2. You've got this dip leg where you're changing elevation, which is going to create a rotational torque. Strike number 3. Let's get this hot. Let's pressure it up, and this is what's going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and let this run through all the way. If you want, you could view it again on YouTube.
So many lives were lost 50 years ago because modifications were made by unqualified plant personnel to a well-engineered bellows expansion joint piping system. A series of vessels were designed with a single bellows between each, and those took up the thermal growth in the system. And those bellows were designed to handle upset pressure conditions. Crack was found in one of the vessels, and plant personnel determined to remove and simply plumb around it. Here's why that was a bad decision.
I love that phrase. They decided to simply plumb around it. Kind of makes me think about what I was doing with our shower drain over the weekend. Definitely unprofessional.
Those vessels are acting as an anchor against the pressure thrust force of the bellows. When the bellows is pressurized, it's going to want to extend. That's why it's got to be held back by those rigid points. Bellows also have a pressure point at which they'll go unstable or squirm. Fatal mistakes the plant personnel made is leaving in the second bellows, and that makes for a very unstable system. The second mistake was doing an offset in the piping system or a dog leg. That's going to create unbalanced force, a torque, on that piping system. Scaffolding was added in hopes that it would somehow stabilize that center spool, but it didn't work. A pressure spike did occur in the system, didn't mess up the other bellows, but this was the weak point. Here are the two failure modes acting one right after the other. First, the pressure thrust bends that piping, and then the instability kicks in. And sadly, the flammable gas then spreads throughout the plant until it finds an ignition source.
All right, so that's a little bit about the Flixboro disaster. Now, again, I think it's pretty obvious at this point in time that there were a lot of mistakes made, and right now, on the screen, you really didn't have the right people doing the approval and checking to make sure that the design was done properly, checking sure to make everything was done. And if you delve a lot deeper into the accident, there were a lot of changes that were half made and not complete. Tracking of the changes was not done properly. That's why we are now in the area where we have a formalized management of change process. And in terms of a formal management of change process, it's possible to do this on pen and paper, but using a relational database to track these things is going to make life a lot better in the future. And also, the use of electronic means, cloud-based databases is going to allow us in the future to potentially leverage artificial intelligence to continue to help things from slipping through the cracks. So whereas the process engineer at Flixboro might not have known that that he shouldn't have left two expansion bellows on the same pipe segment, I wonder, I haven't done this, but I'm doing this completely on the fly. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pull up my copy of ChatGPT, and I'm going to say, I am designing a pipe segment. Is it okay to have two expansion bellows at different elevations? Let's see if ChatGPT knows the answer to this question. Oh my God, it said yes! Okay, yes, it's technically acceptable, but there are considerations. Alignment and misalignment, anchor and guide placement, piping flexibility analysis, pressure thrust considerations. Well, I would have hoped that ChatGPT would do better, but it is bringing in a lot of consideration. So this is something I'm going to get into a little bit later on how we would utilize your company's MoC database to help engineers make decisions about how to do the workflow. So what I'm going to do right now, as most of you have figured out at this point in time, I am in the Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite. I'm going to make the screen a little bit larger so that it's legible to everyone. Many of you know that when you're in the Integrated Safety Suite, on the left-hand side, you're going to have all the list of all the facilities that you have available. I am working right now in the General Oil and Gas Operating Company facility, which is a fictitious plant that we created to do demos and training classes. I'm going to go into the Texas City gas plant. So many of you know that in the Texas City gas plant, in the separations area, we've got all of our HAZOPs and LOPAs and bow tie diagrams and such. But one step up for the plant as a whole, I've got an instance of an Intelligent-MoC database. This is the tool, this is the database tool that we are building. We are now beta testing and looking for feedback on to do the MoC process. So if I go into the Intelligent-MoC application, you're going to have a dashboard. My current year MOCs are completely empty because it is January 8th, but I'm sure by the end of the day today, I will add a couple items in. So you've got your dashboard for what's going on, what's open in terms of MOCs, what's open in terms of action items. I'm going to click over here and I'm going to get a list. This list is going to give me all of the open MOCs from the plant. So an MOC, or what would be more technically called a change request. So when you want to make a change to your chemical plant, let me just kind of pull one up just for viewing purposes. I'll bring the first one up. It says revise the tubing arrangement of the differential pressure level transmitter for high pressure separator V101. Currently the taps are reversed and need to be switched to show the correct pressure. Okay, there's a work item that needs to happen. So when I double click on that, it's going to bring me into the details of the MOC process. And it begins by giving me a request for change number, description, dates requested, whether it's an emergency, standard, or temporary. This is an emergency because the plant doesn't work and we need to get it going. What plant are we making the changes on? When is it closed? It's not closed, it's still open, who originated it, and so on. Now, this is a description of what change we're trying to make, and you can, get as elaborate on this description, as you want. And one of the first areas that we're going to apply some artificial intelligence is providing you with a little help of writing a clear and precise description. Now, for every change, you don't just write the change and have everybody look at it and go, yeah, let's do that. There are a series of tasks that need to occur, and then there are going to be reviews and approvals that are going to need to occur throughout the workflow. And all of this work is going to occur according to a gated, staged process with requirements to get from one stage to the next. So you'll see that in this MOC that I'm looking at right now, there are 6 stages: proposal, action execution, pre-startup safety review, startup approval, post-startup actions, and closure actions. And right now you'll see that we cannot even get out of the proposal stage because we have a red light, which means that there are tasks that need to occur or approvals that need to occur during the proposal phase that are not done yet. So because I am hovering over that red light, it's telling me that there is a review that needs to be done before I can exit this task and mark it complete. And here there is a equipment modification task that needs to happen before I could go through the gate. So you have your overview that describes the change you're trying to make, but every request for change is going to have a pile of tasks associated with it. It's going to have a series of approvals that are required, and it's going to have a series of stages or gates that you're going to need to maneuver through before you can close the change request out. Now, setting up what these stages are, what the approvals are that need to occur, is something that you're generally going to nail down one time in your corporate or in your site workflow for doing management of change. And that's kind of the key topic of this webinar, is setting up what that workflow looks like, because that's before you even do change request number 1, you need to make sure that your workflow is set up. Tasks, on the other hand, are going to be different for every change that you make. So if you look at the tasks that we're doing, we're basically having a tubing arrangement changed because what is happening, or the arrangement of the tubing currently is incorrect. So there are activities that are going to need to occur as part of this change process, and we have tabs for the categories of changes that might need to happen in order to help you think through the process. So the one that everyone really thinks about is the equipment part of it. So what physical equipment do I need to buy? What construction process do I need to go through to implement the change? So there's going to be a task for this MoC where I need to have a technician physically go out in the field and redo the piping to switch the high pressure tap and the low pressure tap on this differential pressure transmitter. So you can add new tasks by clicking the add button. And if we have an existing one here, you can go ahead and edit that task. And when the task is done, whoever performed the task can go in and set a completion date. And when you set a completion date for the task, that signals to the software that that task has been executed. Now, these equipment tasks are the ones that are always front of mind. But from a PSM, process safety management perspective, the tasks that are really important are the risk analysis tasks. So we have tabs where you can add items for process hazards analysis, for startup reviews, or for checklists of any type. So most of your organizations are going to have a long series of checklists that need to be gone through in your MoC process. Well, the good news, if you're a Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite user, is that most of those checklists are going to exist in open PHA files inside this framework. So you can simply say what you want the item to be, and then you can link to an open PHA study so that everything is connected, linked together, and viewable from one location. I'm going to cancel this though, and I'm going to look at pre-startup safety review is the one area that we had. And when you're setting these tasks up, you're assigning users who are going to be responsible. You're assigning the stage in the workflow when that task needs to be done, target dates, and then when you set a completion date, that means that that task has been performed, which allows you to close things out and progress through your workflow. So equipment is the one that you think of first. The PHA stuff you think about second, and you realize it's important because this is why we do MoC. So we have third parties reviewing things and checking things. But there are other items that are extremely important to management of change that often get forgotten if someone doesn't tell you what those activities need to be. So there may be training. When you make a change to the process, it could impact training classes that describe how to operate the plant, that describe the risks of the plant, and so on. So you may need to update training classes, and when you update the training class, maybe you're using the Kenexis Process Safety Training Center for those training classes. That's going to trigger the need for the students to retake the training class after you've done the update. Of course, the training may be as simple as just walking through the control room and telling people what the change is. Nevertheless, even if it is something that simple, it's something you're still going to want to track and document all the way out through conclusion. Procedures. So if you wrote a procedure with the taps the wrong way, you're going to need to rewrite that procedure with the taps the correct way. So do I need to update my training? Do I need to update my procedure? And the last item is PSI. So if your piping and instrumentation diagrams or your installation isometric drawings show the taps being connected the wrong way, you're going to also need to redo those drawings as part of this process. And again, with all these tasks, that might be something that you do in post startup actions. It might be something you do in closure actions. You might be required to do it before you do your pre-startup safety review, but you're going to set the stage when that activity needs to occur, and you'll be able to track all the activities that are required for every gate, and then the approval process to get to the next gate. Okay, so those are the tasks. There's another miscellaneous item under tasks just called action items. If you have something that must be done as part of your change process and it doesn't fit neatly into one of these categories, you can follow it under action item. The next step over is reviews and approvals. Now, for reviews and approvals, you'll see that there is an item called during the proposal stage, I need instrumentation and control to perform a review before the activity is completed. Now you'll note that we can edit this item, and I can update it, and I can cancel, but I can't delete it. So when an approval is required, it is required. There's no way that the end user can circumvent it, go around it. And the process for doing that review is pretty formalized because we know what stage the review needs to be done in, and we know what discipline needs to perform that review, and you're not going to be allowed to get to the next stage until that happens. So if I want to say, okay, I'm done with my proposal, I mean, I wrote all this stuff up, we're good to go, it's approved, yes? Well, no, it was not approved, because this is approved, has nothing in it. So when I go to stages and I try to hit mark complete, it's going to say the mark complete operation could not be done because of an incomplete review. So basically, it's not going to allow me to proceed to the next stage because either tasks are incomplete and reviews or approvals are not done. Now, on a change request by change request basis, you can add reviews. So if I wanted to insert a new review to say that during the closure actions phase, someone from process engineering needs to do the review, I can insert that, and now I will add it. So you can add reviews, but you can't delete any. Chris, question.
Yes, if you're currently an OpenPHA user and the changes to LT 101, is there a way to search OpenPHA for scenarios referencing LT 101 from within Intelligent-MoC?
That is an excellent question. And the answer is yes, but. Yes, but it's only currently available as a development tool inside Kenexis. I will get into that in just a second. We at Kenexis have developed some artificial intelligence tools. It's a subcategory of artificial intelligence called retrieval augmented generation. So you will be able, inside Intelligent-MoC, to be able to open up something similar to like a Microsoft Copilot window, and you can ask questions about your PHA data, and it will answer the questions. So it's more advanced than just a typical search, but that is under development. Now, I don't expect a formal official release of Intelligent-MoC until January of 2026. So everyone who's using Intelligent-MoC in 2025 is getting it for free because you're in the beta test program, essentially. But that functionality for being able to do natural language queries and searches of your PHA database, I expect that actually to be available prior to that, probably around the May to June timeframe of this year. Okay. All right, so we were in approvals, we were in stages, and I noted how you can add approvals, but once an approval is set, it cannot be deleted, and there are some approvals that are part of your workflow that are always going to be present all the time. So let's go back into this review that needs to occur during the proposal phase. So which says basically somebody from instrumentation and control needs to review the proposal and verify that it is appropriate. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit this item, and I'm going to select a reviewer. Now I can't select a reviewer because the database isn't set up for it yet. So I'll show you how to set up the database to make this kind of stuff available. And selecting the reviewer can be done by basically anyone who has access to the software. So if you have access to the software and you want Joe over in Unit 200 to do the review, you will be able to pick him out of the list if he was qualified to be picked out of the list. So let's go into that a little bit. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to cancel out of here. I'm going to back out of the change request. So now I'm out of the individual change request into the main part of the software, and I'm going to go into the study settings. So the study settings is what we're going to drill down into in a lot more detail here in just a second. But you'll see that there is a list of disciplines in the facility and then a list of reviewers who are capable. Now the study settings is not going to be available to everyone. Study settings are only available to site administrators. So putting someone on the reviewer list is something only a site administrator can do. But once the person is on the list, anyone can assign work to them effectively. So I'm going to add a reviewer, and I'm going to make myself a reviewer for the instrumentation and control discipline. And I'm not only allowed to review stuff, I'm also allowed to authorize stuff. I'm going to insert myself in as a reviewer. And then I'm going to close this down. Now, when I go back into this MOC and I go into reviews and approvals, I could go into this proposal and I could select myself now because I'm on the approved list for people who are allowed to do reviews on behalf of instrumentation and control. I can put in some comments like agreed that the taps need to be changed, and then I'll set a target date for, actually, what is today is the 8th, target date for today. Somebody would have actually put in the reviewer and the target date. When I do my review, I put in the completion date and completion date of today. When I hit update, now that task is complete, or actually it's not complete because I didn't hit the approved button. So I am going to need to talk to my software engineer to figure out why, even though I have put a date in for completion date, the is approved has not been closed out. So again, that's why we're doing beta testing, is to kind of go through this process and make sure that all the bits and pieces are approved. In any case, That was done. So this proposal phase was only waiting for an approval. Now that we've been green lighted, I can hit the mark complete button, and now that phase has been completed and we're moving on to the action execution phase. Okay, so the intention here was not to go through every aspect of management of change. It was to go through that workflow process. And I'm going to go through the workflow and the setup process with a focus on all of the people who are getting ready to do the beta testing of our software and try things out and set their own workflows up. So I'm going to back out of the Texas City MOC. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to, where did I go? I know I built this somewhere. The Bayou Offshore Facility. So this one I'm going to delete. Bear with me for a second on that. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to actually delete this also. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a study file. Now, this is critical, and this is going to get into a little bit of the commercial aspects of what we're doing inside our software platform. So most of you that are familiar with KISS know that, if I want to create a new fault tree, I just click here on Insert Arbor. If I want to create a new bow tie, I click here to Insert Bow Tie Queue, effigy. So there is also this Intelligent-MoC. Now, because I am a Kenexis administrator, have the ability to insert an Intelligent-MoC file. End users, our customers, you don't do this. Kenexis does this for you. And that's because when we do our pricing for Intelligent-MoC, there's going to be an annual fee per Intelligent-MoC study. We don't charge based on the number of users. We don't charge based on the number of seats. We don't charge on the basis of active users. Basically, there is one flat low rate of $4,950 per year per study. Now, if you can take your entire organization and put them into one study, more power to you. Don't recommend it, but you could go for it. Generally, what we'd be looking at is individual physical sites having one file. And now you can have an infinite number of users that are able to access that. Basically, anyone in your organization is going to be able to access that. But setting up that file is something that only Kenexis can do. You just need to tell us where to put it. So if someone told us to put it in the Bayou Bay gas plant or Bayou Bay platform, I'm going to go ahead and call this platform MOC. I'm going to create the study. And now you'll see that the study resides right here. So this study was just created. When I go back into it, you're going to see everything's empty. Nothing is shown on the dashboard. There are no change requests, no open change requests, no change requests. This button shows me my action items as a person, as an individual user. There's nothing to see here. The only thing that's available is the study settings. And here you're going to be able to add in a list of process units. You're going to be able to add in stages, disciplines, reviewers, and review lists. This list of disciplines and this list of stages is kind of the Kenexis default. We tried to save you a little bit of time, but ultimately every organization generally has all of this already set up, and it's a matter of customizing to match what you do. But before we go into this, I need to back out even further, because what you're going to need to do first is put in your users. Chris, do we have a question?
Yeah, I think you need to clarify the pricing a little more. Is the price for each study?
The price is for each study. That's correct. And we expect only one database study will be required per physical site. So if you have an oil refinery, we would expect that you would only need one study for the entire oil refinery. If you have like 5 small chemical plants, you could probably do all of your chemical plants in one study. So when we say a study is going to be multiple MOCs, multiple change requests. Every change request that occurs at a facility is going to happen in there. So infinite number of users, infinite number of actually, the number of sites is not limited either. It's only limited by practical limitations for unit names and so on, which I'll get into in just a second. So, and again, that is, like I said, we're not expecting to release this completely commercially until this time next year. I don't expect I will want to change my philosophy, but if someone has issues with what my philosophy is, I would be more than happy to discuss them. Okay, so now we have a study file, or we have an MOC database that we've created for this offshore facility. Now, let's go, and this is going to need to be accessed by many people. So when you set up your MOC, you're also going to need to set up your organization. So in Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite, you will have an organization set up, and that organization is going to have administrators. When you have an organizational administrator, they will have this icon on their screen that I'm kind of hovering over to bring you to the organizational settings. Now, there's settings for security, but the one we're interested in right now is users. So your organizational administrator is going to be able to add new users, as many users as you want. There is no limit and there's no cost to adding users. When you add a user, you give them a username that is necessarily their email address in order to make everything unique. First name, last name, and then what roles are they going to maintain? Are they also an administrator for the organization? Will they administer your training program? Are they allowed to edit, or are they only allowed to view? So that's how you add users. And again, no limit to the number of users, no cost for adding users. Yes, Chris.
Question out there. If you are not an OpenPHA user, how do you perform risk assessment, and how is Intelligent-MoC study going to help?
Okay, so if you're not an OpenPHA user, you can still track all of the risk analysis studies in Intelligent-MoC. It's just that you will be tracking them as a PDF, or you can always put notes in on a file location of where the study is maintained, or you can upload a PDF copy, or it doesn't even need to be a PDF copy. You can upload an electronic copy in whatever format you have into the Intelligent-MoC database if you're not using OpenPHA. Okay, so now we have a list of all of the people in our organization. That's a starting point, even before you build your Intelligent-MoC study, is who are the users in my organization. Once I've set up the users, now I can set up the workflow, and setting up the workflow is all occurring under the Study Settings tab. So the first item in the Study Settings tab is a list of process units, because when you're doing your MOCs, you're going to want some sort of delineation between what plants you're using. So I might say, well, unit 100 is utilities, and I'm going to add a new process unit to say unit 200 is reaction, unit 300 is storage. Okay, that might be typical of a small plant. And so as you're doing your MOCs, you can kind of break down what area is this change request associated with. Now, this would be if you were setting up your MOC database for one physical site. Now, you might have a giant site where you would want to have a different database for your chemicals complex versus your refining complex. You might want to have separate databases. So there's a lot of flexibility on how you'll set things up. Of course, that flexibility may come at a cost. But what you'll also notice here is that you might have the ability to do multiple plants. So if, let's say I am working in an organization where I have a lot of goo pot stirrers, as John Rezebeck would say. I have a bunch of goo pot stirrers located around the country. So maybe I have an Ohio plant, or let's call it P1 is the Ohio plant, and P2 is the Indiana plant, and so on. So if you kind of have smaller organization, or like a bunch of small plants, you can use the same study to track data for all those plants. It's all a matter of splitting into multiple studies when having multiple groups becomes unmanageable. Now, when can having multiple groups become unmanageable? That's going to get to the rest of the life cycle. Now, after you list off either your processes or your facilities, however you want to organize yourself, the next thing you're going to want to do is set up your stages. So your stages are your workflow. What we're showing here is a very simplified workflow. The first step is the proposal gets written. Then after the proposal is written, you execute all the actions. That's stage 2. After all the actions are executed, you'll do a pre-startup safety review, PSSR. Once the PSSR is complete, then you will go through an approval process to allow the chemical plant to be restarted after the changes have occurred. Once the startup is complete, there may be some post-startup actions that need to occur. And then after that, there may be some closeout actions just to kind of verify that all the documentation is complete. I have seen this 6-stage MOC process, I would say, is absolutely bare bones. Most oil refineries that I've worked with, their stages are going to be closer to 13 or 14 stages. Yes, Chris, question.
Can you explain the risk assessment checklists? Are they implemented in Intelligent-MoC? For example, are the checklists linked to external files such as Word or a PDF, etc.? Or can the checklist be built into Intelligent-MoC?
The checklists are not in Intelligent-MoC. The checklists are going to be in the checklists are going to be in OpenPHA. So Chris, I'm going to answer that question, but it takes a little while to explain or to answer the question, and it's going to throw me off of my flow. So Chris, please take a note to remind me if I forget to answer that question once I get done with the setup. I will
Okay.
get to that question once I get through with the setup.
Okay.
Okay, so if this process is not sophisticated enough for you, let's say I want to add a new stage called proposal review, which, having proposal review as its own separate stage seems a little bit over the top for me, but whatever. Let's say I want to add that in. I can add a new stage, click the insert button, and when I click on the insert button, you see that it put it down at the bottom. So what I need to do is I need to take this item and move it to the top by clicking that up button repeatedly to get it to where it needs to go. So now instead of 6, we have 7 stages that includes proposal review. If I want to delete a stage, I can click on the delete button, and then I'm going to delete that stage. So this is my new revised workflow. So step number 2. Step number 1 was getting all your users into KISS. Step number 2 was process unit list. Step number 3 is setting up what is your workflow. What are the stages that you're going to execute, and what order are they going to occur in? Okay, once you set this up, it's going to apply to every change request that you perform from that stage on until you edit it. And I'll show you how that works. So this is our new workflow. The next thing we're going to list off is a set of disciplines. So if you remember going back to Flixboro, we had a process engineer who did the plumbing fix instead of a mechanical engineer doing the plumbing list. So we need to create a list of disciplines. And this, what you're seeing on the screen, is the Kenexis default. You can add, you can delete. So if I want to say HSE management is another discipline that I want to put in here, there they are. HSE management is now a discipline that I could put in. And the disciplines are what you are going to assign to reviews. So reviews get disciplines. Which brings me to the next task. Task number 5 is creating a list of reviewers. So we have a list of disciplines. We have a list of users. Now we're going to correlate the two. So for a reviewer, let's say I want, for the discipline of HSE management, I want to assign Kevin Mitchell to be an official reviewer that is authorized to review and approve things related to HSE management. So now you have your list of disciplines, and then you're assigning people that represent that discipline, and those people are going to come off of your company's user list. Finally, the last thing that you need to do in the study settings is provide a list of reviews that always happen. So when you put a review on this list, it is going to be required for every change request that ever occurs in the future. So when I click add a review, during the proposal review stage, I'm going to want HSE management to do a review of the change request, and also during pre-startup safety review, I'm going to want HSE management to do a review and approval. And let's see here, why not? I'll just leave the management ones here. So these things are required for every MOC that will ever happen. But when you set up an individual ticket, you can add more reviews. Okay, so let's just, now it's going to take you a lot longer to match up the stages, disciplines, reviewers, and reviews with your existing corporate guidelines for how you do MOC. But basically, it's just more instances of what I've just talked about. At this point in time, let's just say we're done. We're a very small, very simple company. This is all that is absolutely required. I'm going to close that out. Now that I've done my study settings, I am able to create new change requests. So when I click the Add Change Request button, a couple of things are going to happen. So let me put in a RFC number. Right now, the RFC number is open for you to type in whatever you want. The only restriction on the RFC number is that it can't be a duplicate of something that's already there. So let's use a very simple process to say the year is 2025 and this is change request 0001. And I'm just going to say change request. I requested it today. It's going to be required to be complete by the end of the month-ish. It is going to be a standard change, standard changes, emergency changes, and then temporary changes are possible. When you have a temporary change, there's more documentation that you're going to need to go through. And then what area am I going to perform that change to? Oh, well, this is going to occur at P2, that Indiana plant. And yeah, once you fill this information in, you click the insert button. Now, when I click the insert button, you'll see that tasks show up, the ability to add tasks show up, the reviews and approvals show up, and the stages show up. These reviews and approvals and these stages are the ones that we defined in the settings. So they show up. You cannot add stages. You cannot delete stages. These approvals that were required in the company template cannot be deleted, but you can add new reviews, which is generally important. And the reviews that you're going to need are going to change depending on the type of change. So for Flixboro, if you want to plumb around an existing reactor, well, there should probably be a review from mechanical engineering occurring during the action execution phase. And let's say we're going to want to do that around the 30th of the month. So you can add more reviews in, but you cannot delete anything that's in the template. And really, this first stage when we're doing the proposal is when we're going to be doing the setup. And the setup involves defining what are those tasks that need to be done, what are the reviews that we should do, and then of course stages is just kind of tracking everything. But setting up the tasks and setting up the reviews, this is an area where we also intend to leverage those artificial intelligence tools to say, okay, based on the description of the change that you just input, historically in your company, when you've asked for a change like this, these are the tasks that you typically would have done. These are the reviews and approvals that you would have typically implemented that aren't being shown on the list. So it's providing you some additional guidance to flesh this out and not miss anything that's important. So I fully expect that we're going to have that type of functionality good to go before the first commercial release of the software. Okay, so that is how you do the setup, and that's kind of the key thing that I wanted to focus on for those people that are going to be entering the beta test program of our software. Now, I'm going to step back and I'm going to answer the question where we're going into a little bit more detail. Okay, so in this change, there might be a pre-startup safety review that we need to do. So we'll say, okay, I want to do a pre-startup safety review checklist. So that checklist is going to be completed. Now, the way things are set up right now, and I'm just going to, let me fill this stuff out, and I'm going to make myself responsible for this with a target date of the 23rd. Okay, so this task is in here now. When I come to this task, if I click on File, I have the ability to upload. I'm going to be able to upload and insert a new file. Actually, I clicked on the wrong place. Choose File. So if I did this checklist as an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, I could simply click on that document and I can upload that. So right now you'll see that that document has been uploaded. So whatever you're using for your checklists, it's all there, it's available, and then once I hit enter and update, I'll be able to double click on it and bring that document up. So that document is going to reside inside the MoC database. Now, if I wanted to do it in OpenPHA, it's a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out of here real quick because I didn't set things up as completely as I would have. So right here, we're back out in the study manager area of KISS, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this MoC checklists. And then when I go into MoC checklists, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say insert a new OpenPHA study. And when you create a new OpenPHA study, you have the ability to start from a library template. I'm going to click Start on Library Template, and I'm just going to go into the Kenexis standard library that's available to everyone. But every operating company, every organization, you can create your own custom library with your own set of templates. So in this library, I have a template called PSSR Checklist Short. And when I hit the Import Template button, I'm going to call this MoC 20250001 PSSR Checklist. And I'm going to create the study. When I did that, a lot of you are familiar with our OpenPHA product, nodes, deviations, you do your HAZOP, LOPA, whatever you want, but there's also a section for checklists. And you'll see I imported the PSSR checklist short. When I click here, it's going to give me a list of all the checklist items. And I can say, yeah, have the procedures been updated? Yes. Have the training been updated? Yes. Has the PHA review been completed? Blah, blah, blah. Do all my work, save my file, and go back. You see that study is sitting right there. Now, when I go into this MoC study, I can click on this change request, and for that checklist that I just executed, I can come in and say link to my OpenPHA study, select the study. I'm going to go in Bayou Offshore Facility MoC checklists. That's the one. Link the study, hit update. Oh, I needed to do that in the PSSR phase. And hit the update button. Now you'll see that OpenPHA study is linked. I don't have an extra copy of the study. I didn't need to upload anything. Whenever I edit this, I can always go back and I can look at that MoC document, which is going to be available on the platform. So there's a support ticket in right now. There will be a hyperlink on this file name, and when I click on the hyperlink, it's going to pop open OpenPHA, and you'll be able to edit, view, whatever you want to do with that document. So that's the way that we're handling checklists. And for checklists, It's really easy to build checklists in OpenPHA. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go into OpenPHA, and I'm going to just create an empty study. These options don't matter to checklists. I'm going to use default. And I'm going to do something like, for the study name, I'm going to say that, call this just an instrument install checklist. And then you go over to checklists and you can create a new checklist. So instrument checklist. And then when I click here, I can add new items. So does the instrument match specs? Is the instrument installed? So you have the ultimate flexibility to develop as many of these checklists as you want. And after you develop the checklist, you can export this checklist. So you can export the checklist to a library. And that way all of your stuff is sitting in OpenPHA. The ability to start from a template that you've created for yourself, it's all built in and ready to go. It's just a matter of configuration. And furthermore, Kenexis can do a lot of that data migration and configuration and checklist building for you as a service, if that's something that you're interested in. So hopefully that answered the question as to the linkages between Intelligent-MoC and the OpenPHA for both just checklists, and also any OpenPHA file can be linked all the way from a full HAZOP down to a simple single checklist. Whew, all right, I got a little bit kind of out of my script there, but hopefully I got to answer the question, and then also I got through everything that I was intending to get through, which is literally this study settings box right here. Doing this study settings box is the initial starting point for using the Intelligent-MoC product. You need to define what process areas are going to be covered in the scope of this Intelligent-MoC file. You need to define your workflow in terms of what are the stages that occur. You will need to define what are the full list of disciplines that might be required to review, approve, or do work. You will need to assign human beings to those disciplines, and then make a list of reviews that are always required for every MoC change request. That's the starting point, and those of you that are coming along the beta testing journey with me, this is what we're going to set up first when we have our webinar to do the setup of your facility. So with that, that's what I really wanted to cover today. Hopefully I got through the initial questions. At this stage in the game, I'm just going to go ahead and open the floor to any questions anyone else would have that haven't been asked yet. Is there anything new in the chat, Chris?
Yeah. Is the price for whole Kenexis platform or just the Intelligent-MoC?
Oh, that's just for the Intelligent-MoC. Every module is different. So the one that I talked about is the OpenPHA product, because the OpenPHA product is so intimately linked. OpenPHA is, our pricing is very transparent. You could go to store.kenexis.com, and our OpenPHA is $2,300 per year. So here is and the way our OpenPHA product is licensed, it's by the year, and it is for a seat. So store.kenexis.com, you could go and you could just go ahead and buy the software with your credit card. Pretty easy to do. But in terms of licensing, let me back up on the licensing a little bit for the OpenMoC or OpenPHA product. Sorry, that's not the button I meant to push. The way we do our licensing is per seat. And that means per active user. So right now for OpenPHA, it's early in the year, early in the day. We only have one person at Kenexis. Adriana is currently using OpenPHA, probably for that Westinghouse PHA she's doing. So let's say, obviously at Kenexis we can give ourselves as many licenses as we want. But let's say we only had one license to OpenPHA, and that license was being used by Adriana. The next person that tries to log in is going to get a message saying that your one seat is being used by this person, and you need to wait for them to log off before you're allowed to use the software in edit mode. You will be able to use it in view only mode, even if there are no seats available. And if Adriana went to lunch, I could click that X right there as an administrator and boot her off the system if I didn't want to wait the half hour for the system to automatically clear off an inactive user. So that's the way the licensing works. And OpenPHA is $2,300 per seat. If you go to our commercial website, www.kenexis.com, and click on software, you will be able to get the pricing for all of our software products. So, for instance, our fault tree software, you can click trial request and pricing information. It's going to give you the pricing. We are very proud of our very low prices on our software, so we make them available to you without having to go look for them. If somebody requires you to call a salesman to get a price, it's gonna be ridiculously expensive for no good reason. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And also, if you want to make your life easy, you can just go to store.kenexis.com and you can buy a lot of this software directly from our online store with a credit card. All right, other questions, Chris?
Okay, we discussed searching references to relevant process elements from OpenPHA, like a HAZOP study before. What about in procedures? Is there an ability to easily identify which procedure documents will be impacted by a change?
Excellent. You know what? This is why we do beta testing. I had not thought about that. The answer is yes, that is something that we could do. But not only did I not think of it, so it's not currently available, it's not in our development plans because I never even thought to do that. But what we could do is any data that we have access to, we can do what's called retrieval augmented generation. So basically, if we have access to your procedures, we can read those procedures and index them, and then when you ask a natural language question like which of our procedures could be impacted by this MOC, it should be able to come up with a list of those procedures for you. And that would be a simple matter of being able to catalog your procedures in the Kenexis Integrated Safety Suite, which is probably not going to be that difficult to do. We do have a software tool for writing and performing procedures called OpScope that we've got on the shelf. But not in terms. It's on the shelf. It's ready to go, but we're not actively marketing it. But that makes me think that maybe we might want to actively market it, or just have a repository of procedures to allow the AI tool to do that retrieval augmented generation. So that is an excellent question. I'd never even considered that, but it would be, dare I say, it would be trivial for us to make that feature available. It's on our development list now.
Okay. How are reviewers and approvers notified?
Okay, so that is an interesting question. And in order to answer that question, I'm going to quickly pop up my email. Okay, the reason I popped up my email was to see if the system sent me an email. It doesn't do that automatically. The system does have emailing capabilities, and what those emailing capabilities include is that every time that you are assigned a task, actually, I don't want to go into study settings. I want to go into an MOC. So I created this MOC, and you'll see that I was assigned the task of doing the PSSR. When you are assigned a task, you will receive an email saying that you've been assigned a task. The day, if the target date arrives, you will receive an email saying that you have a task that is due today that needs to be completed. So a statement that's been assigned and a statement that its due date is today is an email that you will get. Right now, and this is something that we're, this is why we're doing beta testing. We're looking for input. Right now, I checked to see whether I had the email, and I didn't, which confirms what I was thinking, is that all the emails get sent out in a batch at midnight U.S. Eastern Time. So U.S. Eastern Time, midnight, a software process gets executed that looks for all the emails that needs to be sent out and then sends them out. So that right now it's happening one time a day. The day, so you'll get it the day after you've been assigned the task. You will get the email. Now that I look at this, we might want to run that task hourly. We might want to run that task on demand every time something has been assigned. We're in beta testing. This is what we're looking at. But yeah, there are notifications that you've been assigned tasks, and there are notifications that your task is due.
Okay. Do you need to have OpenPHA to use Intelligent-MoC?
No, absolutely not. So as you're going through an MOC process, you define the MOC, you define the tasks, define the reviews and approvals, and then you go through a tracking process to make sure that everything gets done. None of that is dependent on OpenPHA. Now, the tasks that can be performed will include PHAs, process safety, PSSRs, checklists. But for those items, you don't have to link to OpenPHA. You can simply select that I have a file, and you can upload that file into the software. Or you don't even have to. There's no requirement that the checklist or file actually gets uploaded into here. You could simply, put in the description that the checklist is on the server, or however you want to do it. So there's no requirement to use OpenPHA in any way, shape, or form. But if you do use it, it's tightly linked and it makes life a lot easier.
Okay, so just to clarify, is there a notification for someone for an approval?
Yes, when
Okay,
you are assigned the approval. So right now I've got these approvals that haven't been assigned to anyone. So for this proposal review, if I am the MOC coordinator or I'm the MOC initiator, I can pick someone to perform the review, give them a target date, and hit the update button. When I do this, Kevin Mitchell is going to receive an email saying that he needs to do a review of the proposal, the proposal for this change request. But he is not going to receive that email until midnight tonight. And that's something I'm going to work on. Once a day probably is not sufficient.
okay, so can Kevin be the reviewer and someone else be the approver?
Yes, but you would need to name them separately. So there would be you would create another review, and the review would simply be an approval.
Okay, and each of those users would get separate emails.
Correct. It would be a separate entry in the database.
Okay. So what is the availability exactly of Intelligent-MoC?
Okay. It is available for use in beta testing pilot programs today. It is ready to go today. All you need to do is send me an email. And for the next year, until January 2025, there is no cost associated with the software. That being said, what you see is what you get. There, it is in beta testing. I expect to find bugs. And then we're going to immediately turn around and get those bugs fixed. I expect a lot of requests for features. Those features are going to be added at a feverish pace. Those features might generate new bugs that are going to need to be fixed. So it's available today for beta testing, which makes it free until the end of the beta testing period, which is going to be January 2026. All you have to do is send me an email, edward.marzell@kenexis.com, or you could send an email to info@kenexis.com. I will set up a Teams meeting with you where we will determine what location we're going to insert that Intelligent-MoC file. We'll set up all of your accounts, get you set up as users and administrators, and get things going. We could do that. Well, it's available today. I'm going to start setting up meetings as early as tomorrow, but anybody who wants it will have it by the end of next week if you send me an email.
Okay, are the roles linked to each site or to the whole study?
They're linked to the study. So now if I go back here and I look at study settings, there's going to be a discipline list and a reviewer list. This is for the study as a whole, which is what makes it cumbersome to use one study for, like, if you're an organization with 100 different physical sites, doing one study is cumbersome because this discipline list, this reviewer list, is going to contain everybody from all 100 sites. This process unit list is going to contain all the units from all 100 sites, which is generally going to become unmanageable unless your sites are very small. And one particular customer of ours, who is the reason that we wrote this software, has 5 sites that are all very small. So they will only be using one study for all 5 of their sites because their sites are really small. But I expect something like large petrochemicals or refining, you're going to want one study per physical site to prevent this reviewer list, discipline list, and process unit list from getting unwieldy. And also for large organizations, the MOC procedure from one site to another site is different, so your stage lists are going to be different.
Okay. Is there a provision to include hierarchy approval levels? For example, first approval is done by the team leader and the next approval by the discipline engineer.
Okay, no, not at the moment. So like a hierarchy of approvals is not something that I've envisioned. It's not built into the software right now. What my expectation for that is instead of a hierarchy approval, it will be the sequencing of the stages. So the higher level approval will occur in like sequence 1, and then the second level of approval will occur in sequence 2, and the different people, the different disciplines will be notated in that sequence. So it's not a hierarchy of approval, it's just defining what that hierarchy would have to be defined in the sequence. Now, if somebody wants to argue for the necessity of a hierarchy of approval, I am absolutely willing to listen. That's what the beta testing program is for. And if we at Kenexis think that that's something that would benefit the user community as a whole, we are open to it.
Is there a provision to integrate MOC with Maximo to share the units and equipment lists?
There can be. Okay, so right now, let me back out of Intelligent-MoC. I'm going to go back into here. We at Kenexis already have these things called API integrations. And one of Kenexis's big power users is using our API integrations to communicate not with Maximo but with SAP. Now they're doing it in Vertigo as opposed to doing it in MOC, and they're taking test results out of SAP and bringing them back into our Vertigo software. So we have the capability to do API integrations for CRUD operations. Again, database CRUD, create, read, update, and delete a record. So if you have a record in SAP, you want that record to be copied into Intelligent-MoC. We have the horsepower to do that. It's available in all of our other applications. It would simply be a matter of setting it up, which I don't think would be a problem. We could probably, if that's something that you're interested in, we could probably get that taken care of during the beta testing this year. In addition to that, Kenexis we're a technical safety consultancy. We know a lot about technical safety tasks. And one of the strengths of Kenexis is in every large customer that we've done a massive data migration process. So something like setting up equipment sounds like a one-time database push-pull that even if we don't have the APIs for you to do it, for a very, very low price, maybe even free, we could probably do that data migration. I just turned my development engineers on to the data structure, and we could move the data across the transom. I want to thank everybody for your time and your attention. I got a lot more discussion here than I was expecting. We're just kind of trying to do a starting point to help understand what that setup is going to look like. Next steps, I've got a list of people who are in the beta program. I'm going to contact each one of you individually to set up times to put your database in the location it needs to be. We'll set up a Teams meeting and we'll go through that setup process. We'll set up your Intelligent-MoC database. We'll set up your checklists in OpenPHA so we can get the linking going, and we'll go from there. Thanks, everyone.